Hi, I'm Aiman, and welcome back to one of my videos in our series of converting our patio to a 3-season sunroom. And in this video, or in the next few videos, we're going to be focusing on this side of the patio. In our last video, we did the back wall, and that's not complete just yet because we still have to put some headers and some jack studs in. But for now, we're going to be focusing on this side of the patio because today we're going to be talking about sheathing. So we're going to be dividing this discussion about sheathing into a few different videos, a few smaller segments, so that we can talk about each of the individual choices that we made in their own dedicated video. And the reason why we want to do this is because my dad, while building this patio and designing it, or building this sunroom and designing it, he did a lot of research and looked into a lot of specifics on how we should do it. For example, like what type of plywood we should choose, what type of nails, how we should space it. And although he's not a master at it, he did a lot of research and found what the general consensus on what we should do is. And the reason I say general consensus is because there's a lot of disagreements online or debates about what should be the procedure when building. And hopefully these videos can act as a sort of jumping point for anyone who wants to start a discussion in the comments to talk about like how to build or convert a patio to a sunroom. And also, if you guys have any tips for us while we're building the sunroom, please put that down in the comments, because we definitely appreciate it. So first off, we'll be talking about the sheathing. So with sheathing, there are many different options that you have to choose from in terms of material. Now, when they first started building houses, the common sheathing was always just wood planks. But nowadays, they have many materials to choose from. One of them is plywood. Now, plywood it's pretty good. If you don't know, plywood is just wood but that is layered, and you can see it from the side. It comes in many different thicknesses. The most common is 7/16, which is about half an inch. But if you live in a higher wind area like Florida, it'll probably be like 3/4 of an inch. It's also very good for floors and other uses. And while plywood is good, they also have another specific material used for sheathing, is OSB, oriented strand board. And as a comparison between these two, actually, I'll tell you what oriented strand board is first. If you look closely, you can see all these tiny pieces of wood are basically put together and just compressed. And on one side, there's a polyurethane coating, while on the other side, there is none. It's actually pretty cool because I can barely even feel the polyurethane. By the way, the side that has the polyurethane on it is going to be the smooth side, not the rough side, which you'll see later. So, as a comparison between OSB and plywood, we're opting to go with OSB for this project. And the reason why is first, cost. OSB is about $24 for a sheet this size. It actually used to be about $6 when it first came out 20 years ago. But the plywood of the same size, sheet is about $40. It's almost twice the amount that OSB of the same size costs. So that's why we're going with OSB, mainly because of the cost, but also because of a lot of other small details about plywood. Now, one of the things that's bad about plywood that doesn't happen as much to OSB is, first off, it has knots in it. And that's just bad for all kinds of reasons. But also, plywood is much more susceptible to warping, whereas OSB, while it can warp, isn't as susceptible to it. And you might be wondering, well, this is cheaper, so there has to be some downside to it, and it has to do with the water, actually. If there's moisture and it gets into the OSB will expand, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But if you get moisture with plywood, it doesn't expand as much. And I guess the reason it costs more is because it's layers of wood rather than pieces of wood pressured together. And I guess between that, I mean, OSB is pretty much the clear winner, right? So if you notice on the OSB, there is tons of information stamped on the board. So we're going to be talking about the important parts right now, actually. So first off, we'll talk about the name of OSB. It's oriented strand board, and the important part is oriented, because this board is oriented so it's strong in a specific angle, or a specific orientation, I should say. And you can actually find the orientation that is strong in on the stamp right here. In this direction, the strength is strong. So the vertical axis is the strength axis. And that's where you usually want to orient the OSB when you're using it as sheathing. You don't want to put it sideways because then it's not as strong. And another thing about that is that below here you can see that it's rated sheathing 24/16, size for spacing. With the thickness, obviously it has the thickness right here. But what does it mean by being sized for spacing? And actually, let me show you what I mean. If you measure out the dimension of this board in terms of width, we'll see that it's about 48 inches, plus or minus, oh wait, I take that back. That's actually 47 7/8 of an inch. And the reason why there is a 1/8 of an inch taken away is because when you put these OSB boards up, you want to have a bit of spacing. And according to building code, you want that spacing to be 1/8 of an inch. Just to clarify, when you're putting sheathing on a wall, like a really long wall, and you put another sheeting next to the side of this one, you don't directly butt them together. You need to leave a bit of a gap. And the reason why you leave this bit of a gap is not only due to building code, but also because when expansion happens, it only happens in this direction. Because like I said before, this OSB board is strong in the vertical direction. The horizontal direction is where expansion occurs. So that 1/8 of an inch allows that expansion to occur without any problems. Anyway, getting to what I said before about the 24/16 spacing, is that, you know, this is about 48 inches. And if you think about it, 48 is actually pretty evenly divisible by 24, which is 2, and 16, which is 3. Which means that when you're building, you're usually going to be building so that your studs are 16 or 24 inches apart. And this is pretty good because when you put the sheathing on, you're going to match that spacing. Let's say you have if you do 24-inch spacing, you're going to have a stud here on center, a stud here, and a stud here. And as you can see, it perfectly aligns with the 48 inches of the OSB. And if you have 3, it's going to be one here, one here, one here, and one here, because they're all in multiples of 16. And earlier, I was talking about how you could orient this horizontally, which if you do orient it horizontally, you'll see that it's exactly 8 feet or 96 inches. You can do that. You're not required to put it up vertically, but if you do that, notice that you'll have to, in order to abide by building code, you have to cut 1/8 of an inch, so that when you put the next sheathing, it retains that gap, while also retaining that spacing. Because like I said before, 96 is also a multiple of 16 and 24. So if you want to retain that spacing while also abiding by building code, you have to make sure you cut 1/8 of an inch gap. And they even say it right here in this installation information. First off, for proper performance, panels must be installed in accordance with APA recommendation. The APA stands for the American Planning Association. They have the phone number right here for support. But right here, we just talked about this. You want to space the panels 1/8 of an inch at the ends and 1/8 of an inch at the edges. We just talked about that. But also, there is this thing right here. It says this side down. Now, what does that mean? So, there's a few reasons that this side down label is important. And the reason why is because this is also not just used for sheathing, but also for roofing and for floors. When you're dealing with roofing, there are 2 things that you have to consider. First is inspection. If you have this facing downwards when you're putting it on the roof, when you have an inspector coming up to the attic to inspect your roofing, they have to look for things like the thickness of the board. This wouldn't pass a roofing inspection because your board is actually supposed to be at least 3/4 of an inch thick for roofing. And since this one isn't 3/4 of an inch thick, it wouldn't pass. They have all the important information on the downside, which is the side that you see from the attic. So it's important for the inspection. But also, when OSB first came out 20 years ago, there was some instance of people sliding down because they put the smooth side, the one with the polyurethane coating that I can barely feel, on the top. This is a bit of an issue because when you're putting it on the top and you're trying to work on the top, it's pretty smooth. You don't have a lot of traction on the smooth side of the OSB, but you do have a lot of friction on the rough side. So you want to make sure that you have the rough side facing the top so that you don't slide off. There was a few instances where people slid off. And that's also another reason why they have the guidelines on the rough side. Because if you're working from the top, then you're usually cutting from the top, or nailing from the top, and that's where you want to use the guidelines. You don't want to use them on the inside because you're probably not going to be working on the roof from the attic. The same logic follows for flooring. You want to make sure that the smooth side is facing the bottom, not only because the polyurethane has the weather-resistant barrier, or no, actually not the weather-resistant, the vapor barrier, which traps moisture in. No, the vapor barrier keeps moisture out, and if moisture comes into it, it gets ejected out. Well, I'll talk more about that later, or in a different video. But another reason why is because, like I said before, the guides on the top side. So if you're dealing with the floor, you want to make sure that the guides are facing upwards so that you can nail it down from that side. But that's an explanation of the labels on the side of the OSB board. If you guys have anything else to add onto the explanation of the OSB board labels, then please comment down in the description, in the comments down below, so that you can help some other people out. The story is a bit different for wall sheathing. Now, for wall sheathing, there have been debates online about whether putting the smooth side on the outside or the inside is the best option. And, well, I'd say that probably putting the smooth side on the inside is the best option, because on the outside, you have the guidelines. So that if you're nailing it from the outside, you're going to be able to have the guidelines for when you're nailing it. When you have the smooth side on the outside, it doesn't really make a difference. But the reason that some people are debating about the smooth side being on the outside is because of the polyurethane, which I mentioned before. Very smooth, can't even feel it. It might help with the moisture proofing. You know, letting the wall breathe. Now, while that is a fair argument, we are going to put Tyvek wrap on the outside of it, which has the same function as the polyurethane. So that argument is pretty null when you realize that this house wrap is just going to do the same thing. So the final verdict from me is to put the rough side on the outside, because you have the guidelines, but also because putting the smooth side on the outside wouldn't really help you that much, because you already put the Tyvek wrap on the outside. So with that being said, that's all the discussion that we have on the OSB board for this video. And actually, in our last video, I talked about how to cut plywood, or cut a straight line through plywood or OSB, so that when you're sheathing it, or when you're putting it up for sheathing, it's straight. So go check that out. Actually, my mom guest starred in that video. Not Azami. Azami didn't want to go out because it was cold, even though he goes to MIT and it's colder up there. That was weird, actually. I'll have to ask them about that later. But in our next video, we're going to be talking about installing, or we're actually going to install the sheathing. So keep a lookout for that. And me and Azami, definitely Azami. I'm gonna force Azami to do it. We'll see you there. But for now, I'm Aiman and signing out. Wait, I'm Aiman, and thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and look at other videos on EyeOnAiman, especially the videos about converting our patio to a sunroom. Also, check out our videos on explaining some other things. Like, I think we're going to be doing a video about the nail specifically. And if you want to add to the discussion about building or constructing a residential space, like I was saying earlier, please feel free to add to this, to contribute to the discussion by commenting down in the comments below. Because I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of things to say about converting a sunroom into a patio, or just building a house in general. But for now, I'm Aiman, this is Burton, and signing out. Peace.